A girl in red, a forest, and a wolf that waits. It sounds harmless, almost sweet, a child's bedtime story. But listen closely, because this tale was never meant for children at all. What if Little Red Riding Hood was not about warning little ones to stay on the path, but about something far older, far darker? What if her crimson cloak was not a playful garment, but a sign, a mark of blood, of passage, of a trial every girl once had to face? The wolf was never just a beast. It was hunger, it was lust, it was death itself, wearing the mask of fur and teeth, waiting in the dark. And the grandmother's bed, not comfort, not safety, but a trap, an altar, perhaps even a ritual of blood. So the question is not why the wolf devoured. The question is why we were told this story at all. To find the truth, we must return to the oldest versions of the tale fragments, where the girl is deceived, the grandmother is consumed, and innocence itself is put on trial. Once long ago, there was a little girl who wore a cloak of deep red. Her mother sent her into the forest with a basket of food for her grandmother, warning her not to stray from the path. But the path was long, and the forest was deep, and there among the trees, a wolf appeared. He asked her where she was going, and the girl, too trusting, told him. The wolf, cunning and swift, hurried ahead, slipped into the grandmother's house, and swallowed the old woman whole. When the girl arrived, she found her grandmother waiting in bed, though something about her seemed strange. She drew closer and whispered, "Grandmother, what big eyes you have." The voice came back rough and low. "All the better to see you with. Grandmother, what big hands you have. All the better to hold you with. Grandmother, what big teeth you have." And before she could cry out, the wolf leapt from the bed and devoured her too. In some tellings, that is where it ends, with silence, a child swallowed by the dark. But in others, a huntsman enters the house, splits open the belly of the beast, and pulls them both free alive once more, as if reborn from the shadows. That is the softened tale told to children. Yet older whispers are far more unsettling. In fragments carried across the countryside, the wolf did not simply eat. He set out a meal, and the girl drank and ate what she thought was food, never knowing it was the flesh and blood of her own grandmother. Then he told her to undress one garment at a time and slip into bed beside him. She obeyed until at last she began to notice the hands were too coarse, the eyes too sharp, the voice too deep. But by then, it was too late. This was never a bedtime story. It was a passage through darkness, a trial hidden in the skin of a tale, where a child steps into the forest and is tested by hunger, by disguise, and by death itself. And this trial was not unique to Europe, for across the world, other stories whisper the same pattern of girls lured from safety of beasts in disguise of innocence, weighed in the balance, and of those who walk into the forest, never returning the same. The tale of the girl in red and the wolf in disguise may feel European, but its shadow stretches far beyond the forests of France or Germany. In Russia, children were told of Baba Yaga, the witch who lived deep in the woods, inside a hut that stood on chicken legs. Like the wolf, she waited for those who strayed from the path. Girls who entered her home were commanded to cook, to clean, to serve, and if they failed, they were consumed. Yet sometimes, if they passed her impossible tasks, they were allowed to leave carrying fire or wisdom as proof they had survived. Here too, the forest was not a place of wandering. It was a furnace of trial where innocence was weighed and only cunning could grant escape. Far to the south in Italy, echoes of the same story surfaced in what villagers called the false grandmother. A girl is sent to her grandmother's house, but the one waiting in the bed is not who she seems. The creature in disguise tricks her into eating flesh, drinking blood, and undressing before climbing into bed. The details are uncanny, almost identical to the darker French versions of Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf has no name here. Sometimes he is a witch, sometimes an ogre, sometimes a devil. But the shape of the story remains. A predator wears the skin of family, and a girl must pass through terror before she learns the truth. And if we journey across continents, the shadows lengthen still. In West Africa, among the Ashanti, there is the tale of Anansi, the spider trickster. In one version, a young girl is lured into his web of deception, promised gifts, then trapped and nearly devoured. Though the animal has changed, the lesson remains: trust given too freely can lead a child into the jaws of death. Even in the far north of Norway, stories linger of the Nuk, a shape-shifting water spirit. To the innocent, it appeared as a handsome youth, or sometimes even as kin. But when lured to the river's edge, children were pulled beneath the surface, never to return. The disguise was perfect, the invitation irresistible, and yet beneath it always waited death. And then across Asia, the pattern repeats. In China, a story known as the Tiger Grandmother tells of two sisters sent to visit their grandmother. On the way, they meet a tiger who kills the old woman, disguises himself in her clothes, and lies in bed waiting.
Why are your nails so long?
The children are deceived, and one by one the questions arise. Grandmother,
Please.
why are your nails so long? Why is your voice so deep? Until they discover the truth. Some versions end in escape, some in death, but the ritual is the same. The predator masks itself as family, and the children must face the trial. In Korea, there is a tale of the dokebi goblin-like beings who can take on human forms. In one legend, a girl is lured into the home of a creature disguised as her grandmother. Once inside, she notices strange details, odd food that tastes of blood, eyes that gleam too brightly, and realizes too late she is trapped. The dokebi, like the wolf, is not only a monster, but a tester of boundaries, forcing the girl to see the difference between appearance and truth. Everywhere we look, the shape of the story endures. A child, often a girl, steps into a dangerous space. A predator waits cloaked in disguise. There is always a moment of revelation when innocence falters and fear takes its place. Sometimes there is survival. Sometimes there is death. But the test itself never disappears. Why do these echoes span so many cultures, so many centuries, so many tongues? Perhaps because every society has known the figure of the child who must leave safety and walk into the wild. Perhaps because hunger, lust, and deception are not bound by borders.
The great wolf spirit,
or perhaps because this story is older than language itself, an inheritance whispered from the first firesides, carried in the bones of our memory. The wolf may change its skin, which ogre spirit, tiger demon. But the truth remains in every corner of the world. The young are tested. Their path is never straight. Their guardians are never certain. And always somewhere in the shadows, something waits with teeth. If such patterns emerge across continents, then the question is no longer whether the tale is European, but how old it truly is. To answer that, we must leave the firesides and the whispered legends and turn instead to the work of scholars and archaeologists, those who sift through fragments of story, mapping their roots like buried bones and tracing them back thousands of years into the dark soil of time. If we strip away the names and faces, if we gather the fragments from France, Italy, Russia, China, Africa, and beyond, a pattern begins to emerge, one so old it may reach back thousands of years before Perrault or the brothers Grimm ever set pen to paper. Folklorists who have traced these tales with the tools of linguistics and anthropology speak of the Arne-Thompson-Uther Index, a vast catalog of story types that allows scholars to track motifs across centuries and cultures. And Little Red Riding Hood, they tell us, belongs to a story pattern called The Girl and the Ogre, one of the oldest narrative bones buried in human memory. In 2013, a group of researchers from Durham University applied phylogenetic analysis, the same method biologists use to map the evolution of species, to folktales. What they found was startling. Using hundreds of variations of this story, they traced its roots back not hundreds of years, but thousands. The tale we call Little Red Riding Hood may have branched from a much older stem, a story more than 200-600 years old. carried along ancient trade routes, whispered around fires long before writing ever fixed it in place. Some scholars argue its origins reach even deeper into the Proto-Indo-European world, where wolves were not just animals, but symbols of terror and reverence. Among the early Romans, the wolf was sacred. It was the she-wolf that nursed Romulus and Remus, founders of the city itself. Yet at the same time, wolves were feared as predators of the night, haunting the edges of villages, stealing children, tearing livestock. In this dual image, the protector and the devourer, we glimpse the heart of the tale. The wolf is not only a beast, but the embodiment of what lurks beyond the safety of the fire. Archaeology, too, has left us clues. Burial sites across Europe and Asia reveal bones gnawed by wolves, children's remains marked by predators' teeth. In ancient settlements, charms carved with wolf heads have been unearthed, suggesting rituals of protection or appeasement. It is no stretch to imagine that parents facing the real terror of wolves, prowling the dark-shaped warnings into story-clothing fear in the language of disguise and hunger. Do not stray from the path the tale whispers, for the wolf waits. And yet the tale is more than fear of teeth. In the red cloak, scholars see another layer. Anthropologists suggest that the color itself, blood red, was no accident. In many cultures, red is the color of initiation, of menstruation, of the threshold between childhood and womanhood. The girl who steps into the forest is not just carrying a basket, she is walking the liminal space of becoming. The wolf then becomes not only predator, but tempter, testing whether she can pass from innocence into knowledge without being consumed. Even the gruesome detail of the girl, unknowingly eating her grandmother's flesh, is echoed in archaeological record.
Myths
In certain
behave
prehistoric
like
sites,
organisms.
evidence of ritual
Mutate,
cannibalism has been
spread,
found not as
adapt.
savagery, but as a way of consuming the wisdom or power of the dead. Could the story preserve the memory of such rites disguised and softened across centuries until only the bones of the ritual remain? Science tells us myths are not random. They behave like living organisms, mutating, spreading, adapting to new hosts, but always carrying a genetic code of meaning. And the genetic code of Little Red Riding Hood is older than the written word,
cunning
older
and
perhaps than the
swift,
very languages we now
watched
speak.
from the shadows.
It is the memory of a child walking into danger of disguise that hides death of blood as both fear and initiation. It is a shard of prehistory carried like flint from one age to the next.
Our research
So when we hear
explores
the tale today
interconnectedness of
softened into a
ancient texts
bedtime
and their
warning,
underlying patterns.
we are not only hearing Perrault or the Grimms. We are hearing voices from thousands of years ago. Voices that knew wolves not as metaphors, but as shadows on the edge of firelight, voices that shaped fear and ritual into story, so their children might survive. But stories do more than warn, they also speak in symbols. And every element of Little Red Riding Hood, from the crimson cloak to the devouring wolf, is a symbol layered with meaning. To truly unlock the secret, we must step away from the surface of the tale and descend into its symbols, where red is never only red, and the wolf is never only a wolf. If the story is more than a warning, then every element of it carries a symbol, a shadow of meaning that speaks to something far older than the bedtime tale. The most obvious is the cloak itself. A garment of crimson, bright as fresh blood, draped around a young girl as she enters the forest. Red is never innocent. Across cultures, it is the color of danger, of sacrifice, of the threshold between childhood and adulthood. To some, it recalls the blood of menstruation, marking the passage into womanhood. To others, it is the color of initiation rites, when the young are set apart, tested, and sometimes scarred, so they may emerge changed. The cloak, then, is not decoration. It is a banner announcing that the child is no longer untouched. She is entering the forest not only to visit her grandmother, but to step across the line that divides innocence from knowledge. And the forest itself, what is it if not the oldest symbol of danger? In myth after myth, the forest is the place where rules dissolve. It is a liminal space, neither village nor wilderness, where spirits dwell and predators wait. For the girl in red, the forest is not merely a backdrop. It is the crucible. Every step from the path is a step deeper into shadow, deeper into uncertainty, deeper into the truth that safety is never guaranteed. The trees close around her like a cathedral of darkness, a place where trials are set and futures decided. Then comes the wolf. At first glance, he is a beast, a predator, a real danger to the people who once lived with wolves stalking the edges of their fields. But the wolf in the story is more than teeth and hunger. He is temptation itself, disguised, persuasive, intimate. He does not leap upon the girl in the forest. He speaks to her, asks questions, draws her in. He is the voice of seduction, testing whether she can see through the mask. Wolves in European folklore often stood at the border of humanity, half feared and half revered hunters of the night, but also symbols of strength and wildness. In this tale, the wolf is not only nature's predator, but also the shadow of human desire, the danger within as much as without. The grandmother, too, is more than an old woman in a bed. She is wisdom age, the past itself. In some versions, she is swallowed whole. In others, her flesh and blood are consumed by the girl. Both images carry meaning. To be swallowed is to be erased, to see age replaced by youth. To be eaten is to be absorbed, as though the knowledge of the old must be taken into the young through ritual. In cultures where initiation required symbolic death, the grandmother's body becomes the sacrifice, the threshold the girl must cross. Even the bed carries weight, a place of rest, of intimacy, of vulnerability. When the wolf lies in it dressed as grandmother, the bed becomes corrupted, a place of violation. When the girl climbs in beside him, she is not only deceived, but initiated into the dangerous knowledge that what seems safe may be deadly. The bed is not merely furniture, it is the altar of the trial, the final space where innocence meets its test. And then, at the heart of it all, there is the act of devouring. To be eaten by the wolf is not simply to die. In myths across the world, to be swallowed is to enter darkness, to descend into the belly of the beast, a space between life and death. Heroes from Jonah to Hercules are swallowed only to be reborn. For the girl in red, the wolf's stomach is both tomb and womb, a place of annihilation and transformation. Even when she dies, even when no rescue comes, the meaning lingers. She has crossed the threshold. Every piece of the story is layered in this way. Red cloak, forest wolf, grandmother bed, devouring. They are not ornaments, but symbols arranged in sequence like the steps of an ancient rite. Together they tell us that the tale is not about a child's mistake, but about the universal passage from innocence to experience, from safety into the dangerous embrace of the unknown. Yet even symbols do not speak alone. Behind them lies a deeper question. Why do we keep telling this story at all? What does it reveal about us, about our fears, about the way we see the border between human and beast child and adult life and death? To answer that, we must step beyond symbols and into philosophy, where the tale becomes not only a mirror of culture, but a riddle about the human soul itself. If every symbol in the tale is a mask, then philosophy asks us to look behind the mask itself. What does this story say about us? About the condition of being human? Perhaps the first question is the simplest. Who is the wolf? Is he an animal, a monster, or is he something that lives inside us all? For some, the wolf is the embodiment of desire, the hunger that tempts us away from safety. For others, he is the predator that society warns against, a danger, cloaked in civility, waiting to exploit innocence. But perhaps the most unsettling possibility is that the wolf is simply human instinct, our own capacity for deception, our own shadow waiting in the dark. The girl then is not only a victim, but a mirror. She represents the part of us that is naive, trusting, open to the world. She is the child who has not yet learned suspicion, the part of us that still believes words at face value, still follows strangers into danger. In her fate, we see the cost of innocence in a world where trust can be fatal. But we also see resilience. In the versions where she survives, she is reborn, changed no longer the same as when she entered the forest. The tale whispers that every human life contains such a crossing, the moment when trust is shattered, when disguise is revealed, and when we emerge altered by the knowledge of danger. And what of the grandmother? If she symbolizes the past, then her devouring may suggest that the old must be consumed for the young to grow. Philosophy has long asked whether progress requires sacrifice, whether each generation must inherit not only wisdom, but also the wounds of the one before. When the girl eats what she believes is her grandmother's flesh, it is a grotesque metaphor for the way we all consume the legacy of our ancestors, taking in both nourishment and poison from those who came before us. At its heart, the tale also poses a question about the nature of disguise. Why do we so often meet danger in familiar forms? Why is it the grandmother's face the wolf wears rather than his own? Perhaps because human beings fear not only what is strange, but what is close betrayal by kin, corruption of trust, the sudden realization that safety itself can be a mask for peril. The story becomes a meditation on the fragility of perception, on the thin line between what we believe and what is real. And finally, there is the forest. Philosophy sees in it not just a place, but a condition, the unknown. To enter the forest is to face existence itself, stripped of certainty. Every human must at some point leave the path, whether by choice or by fate, and confront the shadows that wait. Some return with wisdom, some are consumed, but all who enter the forest are changed. So perhaps Little Red Riding Hood is not only a fairy tale, but a parable of human life. We are all the girl walking into the forest. We are all the wolf hungering behind the mask. And we are all the ones who must decide whether the story ends in silence or in transformation. Yet even philosophy does not give us closure. If this story is a mirror of humanity, it leaves us with a question that has no easy answer. A question that lingers like a shadow at the edge of the path. So perhaps Little Red Riding Hood was never a child's tale at all. Perhaps it was a ritual disguised as a story, a reminder that every step from safety is a step into shadow, and every face we trust may hide teeth. We still tell it to children, softening the edges, giving them hunters and happy endings. But the older bones of the story remain sharp and unyielding, whispering of trials of blood of death disguised as love. And yet the question lingers. If the wolf is not only a beast, but a mask, what lies beneath it? Is it merely our fear of predators, or is it the fear of ourselves? Of the hunger and deceit that live inside the human heart? The girl in red steps into the forest, but so do we. Every time we leave the path of certainty and enter the unknown. Perhaps that is why the story endures, because it is not only about a child, or a wolf, or even a forest. It is about the truth we would rather not face. That the line between innocence and corruption, between safety and death, is thinner than we dare to admit. And if this tale has walked with us for 3,000 years, whispering of trials hidden in the dark, what other stories older still are waiting in the shadows, carrying secrets we have yet to uncover?